Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Defy Ventures webinar, Inside the System, exploring the impact of incarceration. This is session one of a three-part series, which we aim to highlight the stories of the formerly incarcerated to help educate our audience on aspects of criminal justice systems and share insight onto how Defy Venture is working to support this community and ways in which you can get involved and support these very important efforts too. My name is Maryse Gordon. I am an advisory board member at Defy Ventures Tri-State. And today I am joined by four exceptional panelists who have all experienced the US criminal justice system in some way. Today, they will share with us their journey, highlighting their experiences, the importance of education and connections with organizations such as Defy Ventures in finding purpose, in finding belonging and preparing for their futures. So welcome to all of you. I'd love to have an introduction from each of you. We'll start off with Carl.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Williams. I am owner and founder of Royal Men Solutions. I also work with several organizations in supporting the youth. And I am a Defy graduate, I must say. Very proud of it. So thank you for that. But I work in the community with helping the youth and teaching them a skill and a trade when it comes to carpentry and supporting them in their life's journeys to be able to journey up to greater things in life.
Thank you, Carl. Welcome. Mike.
Well, thank you. So it's great. It's a pleasure being here. Yes, my name is Mike Huggins, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Transformation Yoga Project. And we are a trauma-based organization, and we teach tools for navigating life with a little bit of ease, I'd say, focused on the justice system, but also doing a lot of work in the substance use disorder and with veterans. I was fortunate, I would say, or unfortunate enough to be able to teach yoga while I was incarcerated. And that actually morphed into my career in teaching yoga after being released and starting the Transformation Yoga Project. So I've been both inside and outside doing this work, and it's something that's a true passion for me. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Mike. Nneka.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Nneka Jones Tapia. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm also the managing director of Justice Initiatives for Chicago Beyond. We are an impact investor located here in Chicago, Illinois, and we support organizations who are helping to create more equitable opportunities for our young people. I'm happy to be here with all of you today.
Thank you so much. And lastly, we have Quan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Quan. I'm the executive director for Defy Ventures here in Southern California. I am also a Defy EIT. So I've done 22 years of my life incarcerated, and now I get to be in this position to help our incarcerated brothers and sisters out here in Southern California.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have you all joining today. I think we're going to have a really insightful discussion. So we've broken down today's discussion into three main sections. The first covers entry into prison. This is going to be about exploring your journey from arrest to courtroom to prison. Secondly, we're going to look at finding your place and the importance of things like education and programming to support positive rehabilitation and successful reentry. And then lastly, we're going to touch on entry back into society, and then also discuss Defy Ventures and the work that has taken place working with that organization. So to our audience, we will have a live Q&A session. So please do throughout the session, post your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we'll make sure that we have time to pick out a few of those and discuss that with our panelists. If we don't get through all of them, we'll definitely make sure that we get your answers addressed separately. So let's move through to our first section. So this is about from arrest to jail or bail, courtroom, prison cells. This is a personal journey, and I think a very varied journey dependent on a variety of different circumstances. So we're going to go through each one of you. If you could outline this experience for yourself and what that journey looked like. And I'll start with yourself, Mike.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. Maybe I'll start at the end, and if we have time, I'll go back. But I was convicted of a misdemeanor. And during my sentencing, you would think that that was not such a big deal, but it was a fairly high profile case. And the judge, when he was handing my sentence down, decided that I should be taken from the courtroom and start my sentence immediately. So that was quite emotional, with a courtroom packed full of friends and family, and just emotional to watch my children walk away from my children as they start to take my belt and my shoes and all that other stuff as I'm leaving the courthouse. But the real issue for me was, or the moment was, I was taken down by the marshals into the processing center, put in a holding cell very early in the morning. And as I was sitting there by myself, I just, men started showing up, and they were appearing for different court dates. They might be meeting with their lawyer, and it just started the holding cell really just filled with people. And the first thing that hit me was like, oh my gosh, there is such a disproportionate number of men of color here. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, because, I think theoretically or philosophically, we understand the injustice in the system, but honestly, to see that in person, just the process, the discrimination involved in the numbers there was just, it just took me, almost took my breath away. Number one. And number two is I had worked for years as an executive, and had sort of a interesting career. And I had been to many events, meeting people and coworkers and colleagues. And it was almost the same situation where I was in this holding cell. I saw men coming in, and they were talking to their friends. They say, hey, how are you doing? Where are you up to? And it was pretty much the same conversation that I would have when I was in a conference, except that it was different, because we were not going home. We were stuck in the system. So that hit me really hard, and was a really eye opener about kind of what was to come over my sentence. And I think it's for some of the people watching or listening, I think there's a difference between kind of the philosophy, understanding what's wrong with the system, but also seeing it firsthand and understanding when there's a person, there's a human being behind each of these sentences, and what happens to their lives. We kind of look at the numbers and say, it can mass incarceration, but behind mass incarceration, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are really suffering needlessly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of very good points, and I want to come on to you, Quan, to discuss this. One is around disproportionate representation, but you also kind of mentioned that from your conviction, you went straight down to a jail cell, and that's not necessarily, I guess, the same process for everybody if you don't have access to things like bail or whatever that may be. So, Quan, if you don't mind talking about your process, because I know that was a bit of a different journey for yourself.
Yeah, my first arrest, I think my bail was like, they said about 250,000. I was 17 years old. There was no way that me or my family could cover that at the time. So when I went in, it was a lot of people of color. Most of us did have bail, but none of us could afford it. So we just sat there. I remember having to fight my case for about a year and a half, and then they offered me at the time, this was 7 years in the California Youth Authority, or go to trial. And they say if you go to trial and you're found guilty, you get 45 years to life. So I took that deal. I said, okay, I'll just go to the California Youth Authority. I could do 7 years. Yes.
Yeah, it's again, just such very different experiences there, and you highlight two big problems that we see within that system itself. And Carl, I know that you have had a particularly different type of experience, and yours is traumatic in a different kind of situation due to the fact that you were accused of a crime as a juvenile, of something that you weren't, didn't do as well. So that is another type of process. So again, let's kind of go through that journey with you as well, please.
That is absolutely correct. For me, I was a juvenile when I was accused of a crime that I didn't commit, and I was wrongfully convicted of that crime. But my experience having an experience with the justice system starts back when I was just a kid, and when coming into contact with the police officers who were supposed to serve and protect myself and as well as the community, but yet I experienced abuse at the hands of those police officers. Um, as a young kid, being arrested as a juvenile, it affects you in a way that you definitely don't understand. Um, it was a brutal process and experience for me that affected my life then, um, and now, and as I carry on as well, because it's still very troubling and it's a traumatic event.
Mhm.
Um, uh, just being 9 years old and being exposed to police violence. And then you think about the traumatic events that you had to go through in terms of being wrongfully convicted. I could have never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be someone who would have to suffer any type of abuse at the hands of police officer
Yeah.
at the hands of police officers, even though I've seen it in my community with others. But I never thought that it would be exposed to me. Uh, to ask me why, and I couldn't tell you that, even though that it ran rapid throughout my community and it affected, excuse me, many of those that I know as far as my family members and loved ones and friends and those that I was coming into contact with every day.
Mhm.
So there was for me, like a fear and an anger and a frustration
Yeah.
during those processes from then and even to now, especially when you're trying to get someone to have a listening ear to your voice and saying, hey, I'm the wrong person. And
Yeah.
if you connect that along with um, evidence that doesn't align with the actual person who they're looking for, it's that much more frustrating. It's that much more heartbreaking. And then you've already developed a distrust in the system as well as those who's supposed to protect you and
Yeah.
make sure that these type of things that doesn't happen. That has an impact not just on your emotions, but when you connect that to your mental well-being, your mental
Yeah.
health, and um, when you're making demands or you're telling a person, hey, I'm the wrong person, and someone is not listening, imagine how you would feel and feeling powerless or like your power is taken away and you have no power to even stand before those who has this power to just say with one stroke of the pen and you're being our prison cells.
Yeah. And everything you're describing there is about that kind of dehumanization of you as an individual. I think each one of your experiences are kind of reflecting that. So Nneka, coming to you really, and I'd love to kind of hear your view on this from the position that you sat in then and that you do now. Can you speak to some of these, firstly, the disparities in the experiences, but also that dehumanization process that takes place?
Yes. I listening to Mike and to Quan and to Carl, it's hopefully apparent to everyone listening that there is a pervasive amount of darkness that
Mm-hmm.
exists in correctional facilities, and it's really baked into every part of every institution. It's in the culture, and that's what I heard as the three of them were sharing their stories. And the reality is that darkness does not just impact the people incarcerated. I worked in corrections for more than 11 years, and I led one of the largest jails in the country, Cook County Jail in Chicago. I was also exposed to jails and prisons at an early age. My father was incarcerated when I was younger. Other people I love was incarcerated. And what I can tell you from all of those experiences is that incarceration has a, a, a devastating toll on everyone that it touches, from people incarcerated to staff to families to the broader community. Every incarcerated person I have ever encountered has been overexposed to trauma. And there are more than 1.8 million people incarcerated in this country today. Every staff person I have encountered has been overexposed to trauma. There are more than 400,000 correctional staff members in this country. Every family member who has a person they love incarcerated has been overexposed to trauma. There are more than 113 million adults in this country who have had a loved one incarcerated. More than 5 million children have had a parent incarcerated. And so what is that like? What is it like to really carry the weight of that kind of fear every day? I'll tell you, for every 1 year, research tells us that for every 1 year a person is incarcerated, they lose 2 years off of their life. There's a person sitting in Cook County Jail right now who has been sitting there for 12 years, pre-trial, waiting for trial. Yeah. That's not uncommon. For every person who has a loved one who's incarcerated, they lose 2.5 years off of their lifespan just by having someone you love, an immediate family member, incarcerated. And correctional staff, they live about 20 years shorter lifespan than people in the general population. So what that bubbles up to for me is that this process, this infatuation we have in this country with incarceration really equates to a tremendous amount of loss. I hear from Mike, Quan, and Carl is a loss of dignity, a loss of identity, a loss of connection, a loss of well-being, a loss of trust, a loss of a sense of value and purpose. And what I want people to understand is that there is also ultimately a loss of life because of our history and our current use of incarceration as a tool for everything. So this loss is deep and it spans across many communities, all communities and families and neighborhoods.
Thank you for that insight. And again, you touch on, a fair few points, but I want to pick up on that. Namely being that removal of identity, removal of purpose, removal of connection and feeling of any kind of value for your future. So I think it's kind of clear that the process of defining who you are once you're in this situation can be very, very difficult, right? So finding your purpose again, re-engaging with family and friends from this kind of distant world that you're living in, feeling connected to the world in some sort of way, or that you're moving forward through this process, however that journey might look like. But there are obviously significant challenges in kind of getting this new routine in order. So I'll kind of start with you, Nneka, and then work backwards again. But why are there such challenges in this process of like finding who you are?
I think that there's great challenge because correctional institutions aren't designed for people to find themselves. I mean, the reality is that they're not designed for people to exercise personal agency, to make decisions for themselves, to set their own routine. They're not designed for people to be well. And when people are not well, they can't challenge the system, right? And so they're forced to move with the system rather than against it. So it's by design that it's that way. So frankly, that's really how the status quo is maintained. And so people who are incarcerated are forced to figure out basically how they can be well in a toxic system.
Yeah. And, our three other panelists today, I think, were testament to what that mindset needs to look like to kind of get through it. And so, Carl, I'm going to kind of come to you first and just maybe talk about your experience. Like, how long did it kind of take you you spent a lot of time, for something that you were falsely accused of. So how long did it kind of take you to go through that, I guess, cycle of emotions and then find out a way of how you're going to kind of get through this process?
For me, it took me a little while because of the psychological effects and the impact that it had on me when it comes to the trauma that I was experiencing, and when you're not aware of trauma, the effects of it, you are not aware of it neither. So I had to go through a roller coaster of different emotions before I could even begin to build myself or realize what was even happening, because I was um, so discombobulated, and because I was so hurt, because I was so deeply affected. And when you have that type of traumatic experience, it cuts you deep, deeper than you could ever know and imagine, never even having that experience in your life before. But every day, I would, there was an anger, there was the fear, there was a frustration. So trying to be able to uproot those things was a battle for me every day.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
to be in an environment that is not a productive environment that wants to be able to produce something great. It's an environment that tries to cover you and burden you, and also conquer you as well. So uh, to travel through that, to get to the other side, to journey up to something great, you know, as it was a difficult process, I fortunately and thankfully, and I'm grateful that I was able to do so, because not so many are fortunate. They're consumed by the ideas and then that's inside of prison, which changes their features and who they are as a person.
Hmm.
So um, after I started to realize and get a hold of where I was at and what I needed to do to be able to better myself, I started to enroll myself in anything and all things educational, whether it was me going to the law library and reading magazines that I didn't care about, but I just wanted to do it for the purpose of reading and learning words, and reading law books that was outdated probably couldn't help me, but still gave me an insight in terms of how the law works. So, uh, um, and as I arrived at that space, it was important for me to continue on, because I knew how important it was for me in terms of my survival, as well as my release, as well as making my voice that much more bigger.
Hmm.
And when you're going through a traumatic event and then you start to have an awakening, you start to realize that your life is not just your life, it's a shared life. So all of those who love you and support you are affected by it as well. So
Yep.
you definitely want to come up out of that dark place and then walk into a place of beauty, so you can be able to, as I said, journey up to greater and bigger things.
Well, very well said. And that reflects a lot of what Dr. Nneka has just said as well. Um, Quan, I know your journey actually led you to creative writing. So tell us a little bit about that story, please.
Yeah, for me, it took about like 10, 12 years into my life sentence to even begin to have like some type of sense of hope, or sense of that I can actually make something of my life. Up until then, it was just living in prison, surviving the way I felt like, oh, since I'm here, I'm gonna die here, and I'm just gonna live the best way I can. And that's just the way I approached it. Um, yeah, like I said, 10, 12 years. And then when I look back now, like there were several things that just happened. Like my I my younger brother's daughter was born around that time, and I saw her picture of her, and it took me back to my childhood. Like it looked like a spitting image of my brother. It was just a little girl, it's my niece. And I questioned myself, like, how did my life end up like this? Like, am I just meant to die in here? Where I did find my escape is reading.
Hmm.
And I read over the years, but during that time, I was reading books on like entrepreneurship, which then led me down rabbit holes on into this subject, that subject. And somehow around that time, I was reading books on subjects of the saints. I became fascinated about stories of the saints, particularly ones that had failed in one way or another, yet they went on to create these legacies. And these stories really drew me in. Um, and I just, which then, of course, being uh, the book where I jumped on other rabbit holes, and I end up books on mindfulness and personal development, and like they just became like this perfect storm in my head. And it was one day on the prison yard, I was standing there and I said, like, why do I have to view my incarceration as punishment? Like, I have all these great opportunities. Why can't I view this as a chance to make myself a better person, even if I'm supposed to die here? And of course, the answer came back, you can. And it was at that moment I was standing at the prison fence early in the morning, and I saw the sun coming up over the hills. I could feel its warmth. On the little blades of grass, I could see the individual drops of dew, and up above me in the razor wire, I heard a sparrow chirping. And I tell everybody, like, I guarantee the sparrows have been chirping my whole prison term, but I never heard it. But that day I heard it, and that is where, like, I would have to say my journey for understanding and transformation began. And that's when I saw, like, suddenly all the men around me were all just on a journey, some of them much further along, and some of them perhaps not even awakened. But for myself, that's where it began. And then I got involved with other self-help groups. Then I got involved with creative writing. And then I began journaling, which also unlocked a bunch of different things from me in my head, my heart, my soul, and it just began to liberate me. Where suddenly, over the next few years, it didn't even feel like I was incarcerated. Yes, I was there, but I felt like this is such a great opportunity for me just to make myself a better human being. And that's just how it was for me.
I love that. And that just shows the power of a mindset, right? And how you can kind of shift your energy. Tell us a bit about the book, Quan.
Oh, yes, I'm a published author. I have a book. It's called Sparrow in the Razor Wire. It's written for men that are doing. Oh,
yes, I ordered it and it's here.
Yes, it's written for men that are doing long or life-term sentences. And in it, I share with them how did I come to my own sense of freedom years before I paroled from a life sentence. Yeah, today I've been able to donate over 2,800 books to incarcerated men and women nationally. Yeah, so I think it's a way for me just to kind of share, like, this is the little bit that I found, and hopefully in reading it or looking it over, you can find something out of it to apply to your lives.
Wonderful. And I know that it's been put in the chat if anybody is interested in that. Nneka, I know I can see your face, and I know you've got a lot to come back on Quan with, but I'm going to come to Mike first before I go to you, just to hear a bit about your story and the work that you were doing.
Sure. So first of all, Carl and Quan, thanks for sharing that, because I hearing your words, it resonates with me, because the stories are so similar. The events are different, but the journey is the same, I think. And that is, I think, ultimately we all use different words, but maybe surrendering in a good way, not in a bad way. Surrendering to meaning that you're in prison, you're doing what you can legally. Of course, you're not giving up, but the reality is you're there. And so what do you do? What do you do? And I was fortunate to have a relatively short sentence, and although I had a 7-year period leading up to the sentence. So during that period, I left the corporate world. I kind of stumbled on yoga, and it really resonated with me. I went to a Buddhist monastery for a while, and just changed my attitude on life in general. And so when I was incarcerated, I made a vow to myself that rather than being a victim, which I sort of felt I was, but I'm not going to be a victim. This is going to be a learning experience for me, and I'm going to try to find something worthwhile every single day, whether it's with one of my fellow bunkmates or cellmates, whether it's something I can find something to eat, or like Quan. I mean, I was out walking the yard, and I saw a prairie dog, and it just hit me. I was doing like my own kind of prison modified walking meditation, if that makes sense. And it just hit me, and you could find joy. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up was that it's a conscious decision. And if I listen to Carl, I listen to Quan, they worked, they did the work to kind of get themselves to there. I was always sort of perplexed because the prison I was at when I got transferred was a quasi minimum security prison. So there was white collar guys there, but it was primarily men who had long sentences, but only had maybe less than 10 years left in their sentence. So it was a dynamic mix of people. And I was always perplexed that a lot of the white collar guys, they had lower sentences. They might have 2 or 3 year sentences, and they were miserable. Their life was a mess. They were just complaining about everything. And you had guys who had already done 10 years, and they had maybe 3 or 4 years left, and they were positive, upbeat, weren't complaining, and they didn't really have much, to show as far as physical things, economic things. But they were inspirational, and part of that is because they did the work. And I think the point is, you have to prepare yourself because nobody's going to prepare you. And we're going to talk about programs, but it's the same. You got to do the own work. And I think for I would say a pretty high percentage of the incarcerated population, they do the work because they have the time to do it, and it's a choice. Those who think they're going to skate by and they're the victim, regardless of what the events that actually happened, they're going to struggle because the system's just going to eat you up. And I think that's what I just find it so interesting, the other comments, because I can relate to exactly what you went through.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. And Nneka, I've seen you scribbling, so I'm going to first let you comment on what's been said, and then I'll come to you with my question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sitting here, I'm smiling because as I was listening to Carl and Mike and Quan talk, like they are truly embodying like the possibility that exists in people when we stop trying to control them and really give people the resources that they need to be well. Like that's what I heard. And those resources, like we're all talking about this pathway and choices that were made and things that shifted while people were incarcerated, but it really starts in community. And that's what, Chicago Beyond, we've been operating now for since 2016, so for about 6 years, and we have invested more than $50 million in community, in people, in organizations, and ideas, all in hopes of helping our young people to be free. And so when I listen to Carl and Mike and Quan, like it's validating for me that there is greatness that exists in our communities. We have to be willing to invest in our communities. And so, I was thinking about the work that we are doing in jails and prisons across the country. We, Chicago Beyond, recently launched our justice initiatives. And in it, we are really trying to mitigate the trauma that we've all been talking about from this system. And we're doing that with people like Carl, Quan, and Mike, people who have been directly impacted by the system. And what we are calling for is for holistic safety where the people most impacted by the system are brought to the decision-making table to create the conditions for all of us to be and feel protected and whole and resilient. It's really about making system change with us, for us. And so I just am appreciative of being on this panel with Carl and Quan and Mike, and just hearing the brilliance that you guys have despite what the system tried to take away from you.
Absolutely. And I think you highlight something, which was actually the question I was going to ask you about the need for these types of programming. A lot of what has been uncovered with these stories is that they chose to access something that was available to them, right? And that's not always accessible in these situations. So it really kind of highlights the need for external type of programming. And education has been recorded as a basic human right in international law. So we all understand the benefit and how powerful this can be in creating opportunities for people, in creating a better future for people, and therefore you would think would be fundamental when it comes to being part of the criminal justice system. But with that, Quan, I'd love to know, just from your perspective, what education and career development meant for you when it came to either Defy or whatever programs it were that you were reaching out to.
Yeah, like Mike teaches yoga, right? We all have we all been to like hot yoga out here? You know how it's hot, you're in there, you're tired, and then it's at the end, and then they open the doors, and then the cool air washes in, and everything feels refreshing. That's what it feels like with like inside programming, when volunteers walk through with their smiles and their colors, and yeah, I remember that's exactly how it felt for me, and it just gave me such a sense of hope, not only for that moment, but for like I would be on a high for like several weeks after that. So it's like planting seeds for us. Recently, we just relaunched. We launched a program at a new prison out here in Tehachapi in Southern California, and I remember on the day of our info session, we had 60 men that had signed up, and the officers came out, asked us like why we weren't wearing stab vests, like the vests that they to keep. And we're like, what are those for? And they're like, oh, it's to keep those inmates from stabbing you guys to death. They're probably signing up just to come out to do a hit on each other. And they were saying all these crazy things to us. But I mean, I knew better. They didn't know that I knew better. But so we're like, no, we're gonna just have this info session. But they were so scared that they split it into like 4 different sessions. We were supposed to do a presentation for all 60 men at the same time. They didn't let us, they only let us present like about 15, 20 at a time. But then we did talk to the person in charge that helped with the event. We said, hey, when we come back for the kickoff, we cannot have this. We need to have all the men in there. We can't do or Defy programming like this. So when we came back, we were very intentional on how we set up the space, because and before that, the officers would not let us. They said, we don't have any chairs, so maybe it's better you just have them sit on the floor and you guys stand. And I talked to the team. I said, no, we're not going to do that. We can't do that. Like, let's sit amongst them. And we sat down amongst the men, and it just, the men right there were just so hungry for program. And then we came back for the kickoff, and I remember the officers were standing on the other side. We did our kickoff. We started going through Defy exercises. In the middle of it, everybody was up there dancing, jumping around, smiling. And I went back up to the CRM and their public information officer. I said, look, your men, these are the men on your yard that you guys view as like these raving animals. Would you ever imagine them dancing like this? And they looked, they said, no, not in a million years. And it's just, this is why programming is important. And like being able just to have men be treated with like dignity, respect, and just give them a space to be recognized as human beings.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you, Quan. Every time you speak, I'm more excited about reading this book, by the way. And a point you just mentioned there also links back to what Dr. Nneka was saying about safety and the link to programming. So love to pick that up with you again. But before we do that, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with career development, education, etc.?
Sure. So while I was incarcerated, I over time, I developed a teacher training yoga program, and it was sort of off the books, if you will. And it was incredibly successful. And before I was released, I trained a bunch of men to continue on, and that program continues. And it just sort of gave us an inspiration to see how this programming works. And anytime there's quality programming, as Quan says, it's so impactful that I think there's sometimes people assume that, the incarcerated population, they're just sitting around, they just want to play cards or whatever. I mean, really, there's a huge, the vast majority of the population wants to better themselves, and they're desperate for quality programming. Fast forward with the Transformation Yoga Project, we've done 4 times now. We've done 200-hour teacher training programs inside prisons. But what we found the most effective, so we've trained incarcerated men and women to be certified yoga instructors, and with the idea being that they continue on teaching inside of the facility, and then we try to provide some opportunities when they're released, and we'll help them through the reentry process, and then they become yoga teachers. And we've had several who've done that. But to Quan's point, that some of the best program we've done the inside out model, where we've had outside people go into the prison, and it's really a powerful event to learn all these we teach yoga and mindfulness, but it's more about sharing life skills and life events with people that you might otherwise would not meet. And it's an incredibly powerful experience, and everybody walks away. I think the community's better for it. A lot of the people that we're teaching, some of them are lifers, but many of them are going to be released at some point, and we've already seen the impact they have on the outside community. They've become real activists for social change. But those who remain have also seen a huge reduction in their events, if you will. They're not getting in trouble. They seem to be sleeping a little better. They're starting to develop their own, programming workshops. And I think we all can probably agree that the best programs are led by formerly incarcerated people, because they understand the languaging, they understand the needs, and they understand the motivation for that. So I can't speak enough about it. And I think we're going to talk about Defy specifically, but I think fits right into that, in my mind, the most possible successful way to approach programming.
Lovely. And I remember when we were talking, Mike, you were saying that the yoga kind of specifically helped unravel human conditioning that happens within prisons. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Thanks. So if we think about trauma, and Nneka, like you mentioned, we all have had trauma, and I think we continue to have trauma on the after effect of that. But if we think about, particularly, and I deal a lot with male toxicity, and this idea of like violence. And then, if we can start peeling away the layers, behind violence, there's usually anger, and behind anger, there's frustration, and behind frustration, there is this feeling like they're not good enough. And actually, before that, there's shame, what they've done to their families and loved ones who were not there. And then behind that, that's not good enough. And I think, of course, we really focus on that with our yoga and mindfulness programs to really understand our true nature before, I say, life got complicated, before we've had all this trauma. I mean, we were really born pure and self-fulfilling, but life got complicated for us. So if we can provide some tools that we can start to peel that onion back a little bit, so we can get back to who we really are at our core. Mm-hmm. It helps to develop the sense of resilience and the sense that, yes, I can take on these challenges, and not only that, be overwhelmed, but this is an opportunity rather than sort of like a punishment kind of a thing. I'm not talking about the incarceration, but I'm talking about how to move beyond that. Yeah,
great. Thank you, Mike. And Nneka, I know that you had mentioned some parallels between programming and safety in prisons, and you have some other findings. Could you just speak a little bit about that before we move to Carl and his journey? Sorry.
Sure. I will mainly echo quite a bit of what Mike just shared. I mean, it's the programs that are created with people who have been directly impacted by the system that make the greatest impact. And so like programs like Defy, programs like Education Justice Project in Illinois, Anti-Recidivism Coalition in California, the Women's Community Justice Association in New York, like these are all program examples, I think, that are important to help a system that is weighed down by trauma to instill humanity, to see a pathway towards healing, to shift its culture. And ultimately, it opens us up to the idea of a different way to respond to harm. And so for the people who participate in them, we've heard some of the benefit. There's also benefit for the staff who oversee them. I mean, it gives each of these groups the opportunity to see beyond what's immediately in front of them and to really have hope, to feel like their life has meaning. They're a part of a bigger part of a positive change. And that matters. Like, we all want to feel like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. And that's what this type of programming does. And it takes our focus away from some of the negative things that we're dealing with in the here and now. And so, you know, what I hear when I hear people speak about programs like this, particularly the ones created with people who have been impacted by the system, it really empowers people in meaningful ways, and that's holistic safety.
Yeah, perfect. And Carl, the perspective that I want to kind of explore with you, you know, everyone's kind of talked about what it's done for them, what it's done for the people maybe with them in prison. But for you, you had a specific journey with your family and your friends regarding education and career development. So could you speak a little bit to that, please?
I absolutely did. For me, being a person who was able to be educated, what it meant for me was, it meant for me strength, but it also meant for me a healing, because I felt like the more that I began to learn and become more educated, the more it allowed me to be healed, repaired, and then restored, to be able to be that much more stronger, to make my voice that much more bigger. So as my family began to see that and understand that and watch me through my growth, through organizations like PNAP, who brought in college courses and who was allowing those who hadn't had any educational background, or high school educational background, I should say, take college courses, and then began to develop them in a way that allowed them to be strong and more healed when it comes to their spirit and their energy through these educational courses. The more you allow someone to take part in education, I think for me it's a freeing experience. My family began to see that, and my family supported that, for them to know, hey, here's my son, even though he's inside a prison, he's using a skill of his.
Oh, I think we might have lost you, Carl, from a sound perspective. Is that just me, or can anybody else hear? I think we might have lost the sound. Okay.
Yeah, we lost him.
Okay, maybe we'll give you a second to try to recoup it, and we can come back to. Oh yes, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But, I'll try to breeze through it. As you know, for my family to hear, oh, here's my son who's in prison, taking a skill that he learned as a young youth, which was boxing, and teaching the youth this skill, and teaching it to them from the perspective of using humility, more importantly, respect, but just and just teaching them about how that it's connected to their body and to their spirit and their energy, and to doing the right thing, but also being grounded, and also being very disciplined, and then going on to be educated enough to be able to learn another language inside of prison, and then share this. So now they're seeing me go from a student and being a teacher, while still being a teacher. I'm also still being a student, because I was learning from them. So my family was over the moon, and seeing this happen with me. Every time that there was any ceremony or graduation, they was there with open arms, with whistles, whatever it may be, that was allowed, to be able to participate, to encourage me to continue to do great things and be better.
I love that. And you had a graduation ceremony as well, right?
I did, yes.
I have to get that in there.
Yes, I did. But I also had a graduation ceremony with Defy, who, could I just take 1 second? Defy has been such a support and such a great, positive, productive energy, not for me, but to encourage me to go out and do to do great things, to continue to work in my community, to continue to serve my community and others community as well, but also just give people access to opportunities that was given to me. So, I love the beauty of that concept when it comes to Defy.
Thank you. And then speaking of that, I know we've got 9 minutes left, so I'm going to try to breeze through this, and we've also got some great questions coming in from the audience. Quan, your view and the work that you did with Defy, what that meant to you professionally.
Yeah, I was involved with Defy while incarcerated. I got to the business coaching day, and then I was found suitable and was paroled. Continued with Defy after I paroled. It was because of Defy's like belief in me and support and constant like, what's the opportunity and when are you gonna take with it? And that's how I created my first company 6 months after, a commercial cleaning company, still running to this day. And then it was also through Defy's network that I was accepted to this entrepreneur event. It was at the entrepreneur event that I met this other coach who did this speaking thing. I was there that I did a talk at his speaking gig that I was approached by somebody to write the book, and it just all came together like that.
Great. Mike, how about yourself?
Well, so I'm on Defy board, the executive board, and it's just an awesome organization. I've been on the board for about 1.5 years now, and I'm actively working to try to get a chapter set up in Pennsylvania, which is where I'm at, because I believe in it so much. And what I love about it is that, look, I know we're trying to develop opportunities for formerly incarcerated and incarcerated men and women, but it's way more than that. They're providing positive life skills, because we know all businesses don't succeed. A lot of these entrepreneurs are doing really wonderful. So I don't know what the stats are, but they're probably higher than the national averages as far as success rates. But even beyond that, it's providing these skills to navigate life, and that's what it's really all about, to how to handle the challenges. And we could talk a lot about reentry, that there's really no programming, it's all decentralized, you're really on your own. I think the Defy programs really support the reentry process, so these men and women can have the confidence and to do the networking, to feel like they have a community they can navigate as they build a business and look for opportunities. So I'm so excited to be part of this thing, and yeah, it's we can talk about statistics and recidivism, all the things that what the organization does is just so positive. I'm proud and honored to be part of the organization.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I mean, Defy is what has brought us all together here today, which is really, really wonderful. We have some great questions from the audience, so I'm going to move on to that. But before we do that, I'm going to do a quick call to action regarding Defy's work. So we have some slides that we're going to share with you guys, and just quickly roll through that. So Defy's Inside Out program starts while people are EITs, who we call our entrepreneurs in training, are still incarcerated. And we currently are operating in over 16 prisons nationwide, with plans to expand into at least 6 more in early 2023. Our in-prison program, CEO of Your New Life, provides career readiness, personal development, and entrepreneurship training in a way that is very humanizing, affirming, and provides tools to give people their best shot at successful re-entry. Our next slide shows that Defy has served over 5,500 incarcerated people, and we could not do this work without volunteers who come into prisons with us for our one-day events. So we would love to invite you all to join us for Inside Prison to learn more and to encourage and support people who are taking Defy's courses. So our program is made possible by the support of donors and volunteers. So please join us to learn more about the systems we've discussed today. Also meet some of the Defy EITs. You can join Defy as a volunteer, and we have a number of events already scheduled in California and Illinois and New York. And there are several volunteer program events within prison and information sessions available through this year and early into 2023. So the volunteer link will be posted in the chat that will enable you to sign up for any of those. And we'd also love you to consider a financial donation to help us continue to provide programming, or drop us a note if you'd like to learn more about corporate sponsorship and join others who have partnered financially with Defy. You can donate again in the link that has been provided in the chat. A donation of $100, sorry, wrong accent, $100 covers textbooks for one person in a program. $1,500 would cover an entire prison program for one person, but any amount would go towards supporting any of our EITs. So please do consider that. So I'm going to quickly move back to one of the questions that we have, which I think is a really great one. Question is, what helps you deal with your trauma of being incarcerated or in jail/prison? And what could we do to be helping people through that process of that trauma while incarcerated? Does anybody want to have a quick go at answering that?
Well, I'll jump in only because that's what I'm a true believer in mindfulness, and I think yoga could be a gateway to mindfulness to deal with trauma and specifically. So, I think things like trauma-informed care are starting to take hold. We're starting to become more of our vocabulary, and I think those kinds of things where we could look at individuals who are dealing with trauma with a different lens, and not calling them. We usually use a negative when we deal with people dealing with trauma. We try to use the positive side of things of what they're trying to deal with, and so. I think we could be doing a lot more programming to deal with trauma. There's starting to be more out there, but it's pretty fragmented. I would like to see more kind of incorporated into all the programs. So that's a big piece of what I'm trying to do, not only with Transformation Yoga Project, but even Defy too. I know they have a mindfulness piece. I think part of any process for developing programming, I think there should be an aspect to deal with trauma, both for what they've been through, and also what's ahead as far as the trauma of trying to go out on your own.
Thank you. Carl, I think you were going to answer as well, and then we'll go into another question.
Yeah, what helped me, I mean, there were so many factors in terms of some of the things that helped me. Was just being able to have the support and being able to have people to understand my journey and what my experience was, but also me finding a place to where I could do something for me, and boxing was an outlet for me. Like I said, it kept me humble, but it also kept me disciplined, and it kept me keeping the fight going and moving forward. And some of the things I feel like that could be done for those who wants to get involved is kind of understand some of the people who has been through the prison system, but more importantly, communicate with others like myself and others who's been through the prison system without any judgment, but having a listening ear and try to have an attentive listening ear to better understand, but also don't just listen, but be active. Make yourself capable and fit to be able to be active and activate yourself as well as your voice in terms of the outcry and the concerns about someone being incarcerated.
Thank you, Carl. Nneka, there's a question here I want to put to you. I know we are coming up on, well, we are at time, but for those who can stay for another couple of minutes, I think I'd love to wrap up with this other question. What would moving against the system look like?
Yeah, I was actually just getting ready to respond to that question in the chat. And then I said, well, maybe I can mix the response to that question with the response to the first question. So I'll mix both of them. And I think it starts with an acknowledgement that we are the system. And so what does that look like? It looks like challenging ourselves, challenging our biases, our assumptions about incarceration and the people impacted by incarceration. I mean, what we heard here today from Mike, Quan, and Carl is the brilliance in people. And so just going into it with that mindset, and then just thinking about how we as a part of the system, we the larger community, how are we bringing people back into the fabric of community instead of pushing them out into the margins? And so I asked myself that, I challenged the audience to ask themselves that, and we all have gifts and talents that we can share with our brothers who have been incarcerated, our sisters who have been incarcerated. And so I challenge us to do that. And there was another question about, is it safe to do so? And I think what I want people to walk away from this conversation understanding is that we can't afford not to challenge the system. Like, lives are literally at stake. And so any way that we can challenge, again, ourselves, our elected officials, through our vote, through our voice, through our action, we must do that.
Thank you. That was a perfect way to end the session. And I see that there are a number of other questions coming in and comments for our panelists. So thank you all for that. And I just want to say thank you again for joining us. Thank you, panelists, for sharing such insightful information. I'm sure that you've touched many people by your stories and have been an inspiration to listen to. So thank you all for joining. We hope to see you again at one of our next event series, which will be taking place on the 26th of October and November 30th. Sign-up links will be available in the chat, but also can be found on the Defy website. We will also be sending out a very brief survey form for all of your feedback. And we would also like to give you the opportunity to leave a note for one of today's panelists in the survey form as well. I know that you guys have probably enjoyed this just as much as I have, so I know that your appreciation will be much welcomed by the panelists. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again soon.
Bye, everybody.